Alzheimer's Awareness Month. Kristen Judd, you ready to do it?
I'm ready. Let's rock it.
Let's do it. Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of the Alliance podcast. It is Alzheimer's Awareness Month in June, and we have Miss Kristen Judd from Westminster, Colorado, and Five Rings Financials here to talk about it.
Hi.
Hi, Kristen. Good to have you back. Previous guest on the podcast before, but we are here to talk about an issue that is near and dear to your heart, as we'll talk about, Alzheimer's and dementia. Alzheimer's Awareness Month in June. It is happening. So Alzheimer's Association at alz.org, Kristen, they do Alzheimer's Awareness Month every year there, right?
Yep. Yeah. And I didn't realize, we've heard of Alzheimer's for a really long time, right? Like people hear about it, but until you experience it, you don't know how devastating it is. Yeah. So here I am. Yeah,
and it's something that we're going to talk about. Obviously, your journey with your father. I 100% agree that it's as I was researching and on alz.org. By the way, alz.org is the website that you can go to. That's the Alzheimer's Association. They have all sorts of incredible information there on their website. Great resources from fundraising to information about Alzheimer's. There's a lot of really, really crazy stats that I was not aware of. There's research and support for people with Alzheimer's, and there's even they have instructions there if you want to raise funds yourself for the Alzheimer's Association throughout June. They have step-by-step instructions for how you can put together your own fundraiser. So really, really great information there. Hashtag EndALZ is the hashtag that they are using throughout June to spread awareness for Alzheimer's. So just starting, Kristen, with a lot of the things that I learned as I went and researched this site. First of all, purple is the official color of Alzheimer's Awareness Month.
We did this so well. We were
really
like,
did.
Hey.
I think we got every shade of purple covered between her, me, and the background here.
Yes. Yeah.
So we are definitely, doing our part over here. More than 55 million people worldwide are suffering from Alzheimer's disease, and that includes over 6 million Americans living with Alzheimer's. And Kristen, one of the things that I did not realize, and I found as you were talking, as we were having our conversation before this podcast, you didn't realize either, is that part of what they're doing at Alzheimer's, at alz.org and for Alzheimer's Awareness Month is they're trying to combat certain things like every FDA-approved drug in the United States is covered by Medicare except treatments for Alzheimer's.
Isn't that mind-blowing?
It's really incredible, especially for something that is obviously so prevalent, something that's obviously affecting so many people. That would be the case.
Right, especially since 60 to 80% of people who fall under the dementia umbrella have Alzheimer's. Right.
So, and that is something that blew my mind because, well, first of all, and let's go ahead and jump into that because that's something that I wanted to discuss with you is there's this misconception that Alzheimer's is dementia, is Alzheimer's, and they're all kind of the same thing. What I didn't realize is exactly what you said is, first of all, Alzheimer's, of course, is a specific disease. Dementia is a more general umbrella term that can include lots of different things like Lewy body dementia, there's frontotemporal dementia, there's vascular dementia, there's Parkinson's disease, there's Huntington's disease, there's several different types of dementia. Yeah. But as you said, 60 to 80% of all dementia is Alzheimer's. This is a
they're not paying for it.
Thing. Right. Exactly.
Which is so crazy.
Which, the fact that, 60 to 80% of all dementia is Alzheimer's, and the fact that I just said all FDA-approved drugs in the United States are covered by Medicare except Alzheimer's medications, which is, it's very telling. And it's something that they're working hard to change at alz.org through Alzheimer's Awareness Month.
Yeah, the one thing I didn't find was the reasoning behind that. I don't know if you came across that
either.
Yeah.
I researched so why? And that is still unclear, but hopefully something that, with our efforts and with everyone's efforts out there throughout Alzheimer's Awareness Month that we'll be able to change.
Yeah. So what that means, there was another statistic that I came across was that 1 in every 9 individuals over the age of 65 has Alzheimer's. So you talk about a huge financial burden for those families, whatever that looks like, and that's massive.
Yeah, it's something that, again, we were also talking about this. It's Alzheimer's. It's people don't really talk about it. They don't go out and say, oh, it's something very personal. It's something that it's a cruel, horrible disease that not only, of course, affects the person afflicted, but everyone that loves them, everyone around them. And we'll talk about your experience with your father and his dementia and what that's done to your family. But it's something that people don't maybe realize is as prevalent as it is. One in 9 people over age 65 has dementia. That is a significant number. Yeah. And then it's the costs. So we're going to talk about the emotional toll, right? And we're going to talk about, the mental toll that happens on caregivers. But the financial toll of Alzheimer's disease is incredible. I did not realize how costly it can be to be a caregiver for an Alzheimer's patient. One of the stats that I found was in the last 5 years of the life of a person with dementia, and this isn't necessarily Alzheimer's, it's the umbrella term dementia, the out-of-pocket health costs average $87,000, and that is more than twice as high as a person that has cancer in their last 5 years, and 75% higher than a person with heart disease. So this is a costly disease.
Well, and you think about what it costs to be in long-term care. If you have that cognitive space, it's double what other people are paying, right? So that could be anywhere from like $8,000 to $12,000 a month. So then people are like, well, that's pretty steep. I think I'll try and take care of them myself. In which case, you know, someone's quitting their job.
Yep.
And, it could be a child, you know, that takes mom or dad in, and they're taking on that burden. So they have a decrease.
You say 1 in 6 caregivers gives up their jobs.
Yeah.
As far as Alzheimer's and dementia go, 1 in 6 have to leave their job to be caregivers.
Yeah, because that's a pretty steep bill.
Yeah.
And
so it's not just the actual cost of being a caregiver, it's also the loss of income that happens when you have to step away.
Yeah. So, a lot of people are just forced to make hard decisions, which means that they're, not funding their retirement, not, planning for their own stuff because the
life is put
now
on
they're parenting
hold.
their parent.
Yep.
And which is, it's a rough place to be. And yes, there are lots of programs. I've known of a few people who have stepped up and done that. They've gotten certifications so that they can get paid a little bit, but I don't think it necessarily replaces what they were making outside the home.
Not. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And that's another thing at alz.org is you can go there. There's great support for caregivers that connect them to resources like the one that you just mentioned. Caregivers kind of have to, if you're a caregiver, you have to do. You and I were having a conversation about your conversation with your doctor about getting your dad qualified for hospice. You kind of have to fight your own battles. There's not going to be like an easy, clear path for all these decisions you have to make and all these choices that you have as far as care goes, right?
Yeah. Well, so any conversation that I've ever had with individuals, whether they were battling cancer or in this space, is that in the healthcare space, it's a holy war sometimes of getting the health insurance to pay or advocating for yourself with a doctor or a PA or whoever you're working with. It's a holy war to get health insurance to pay or for the doctor to pay attention. And you would expect them to know things, but they don't know things.
Right.
Or, and so there's sometimes even a lack of training.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way.
Right.
I mean, they go to school for a long time.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's
I hate to be bad about that, but
there are a lot of issues with America's healthcare system that we've detailed in other conversations. It really is, like you said, you have to battle. You have to go to battle.
Yeah.
So sometimes, and you really have to advocate for the type of care that you want. And you have to do your own research. So at alz.org, if anyone out there finds himself in a caregiving situation, there is a host of resources there for you to be able to get that information that you need to advocate or do whatever you might need to do. Let's jump in and talk about your personal experience with dementia, Kristen. Your father, who's 78, diagnosed with Alzheimer's several years ago, correct?
Yeah, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. It was probably about 5 years ago. My mom was like, yeah, your dad's missing a step, and it feels like, he's forgetting a lot of things, and I kind of ignored her. I was like, oh, okay,
right,
whatever.
He's getting older, it happens.
Yeah,
right.
It's no big deal. And I probably was in denial for quite some time, but then more and more, Mom would just be like, yeah, I took him in, blah, 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 and getting him tested. And then she's like, I think he has Parkinson's too, and, just all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, geez. And then it was about 2 years ago when my dad just kind of took off and woke up early, and went to go. He was supposed to be in a parade for our small town where I grew up, and they were going to be celebrated. He was supposed to be on this float.
He's a veteran, right?
He's a veteran. But this was a float for previous fair board members who ran the fair. Like they planned for it, all that kind of stuff. But he's used to having a float that was geared towards the military.
Right.
And so he got up early, went up north, a half a mile away or whatever, and or up north, and got the float for the military thing, missed the parade.
Oh.
We couldn't find him. He had his phone. He wasn't answering it. And at that point, I was like, and we're done.
Right.
And we're done. We'd already had a couple of other scares where he would just drive off and Mom couldn't find him. And she's calling me, see if you can get a hold of Dad. And I was like, okay, we're done.
So this is it.
That at that point, I was like, we're taking away the keys. Mm-hmm. So.
And had he already been diagnosed at this point?
Yeah. And he wasn't super bad at that point.
Right.
But, we knew it was going to be eventually an issue,
right,
just based on the diagnosis, that eventually you hear of horror stories when people leave the house and they go wandering or, whatever, because you don't know where their brain is at that time, because they can start reliving a memory from a long time ago. And
it's
doing that.
It has to be so hard to watch your father, somebody who was a completely different person, Vietnam veteran, and the personality. One thing that a quote online that I saw is that dementia, it robs memories, it steals personality, but it also drains savings. It's a cruel disease, and anyone who's watching this who has either experienced Alzheimer's disease firsthand or even known somebody who has had to be a caregiver for someone with dementia, they know that it is the cruelest disease.
Yeah. And the hardest part is it's hardest for those around them. Right. Like, yes, you're looking at, I'm looking at my dad and I'm seeing that, he would never want what he's currently living through, but I don't think he's really aware of what it looks like to us.
He's maybe the least sad.
Right. Like,
right.
Yeah.
He's, as you mentioned, he likes his M&Ms and his root beer, right?
Yes.
And I've heard this as well, like exactly what you're saying. It's hardest actually for the people around.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and really kind of, especially over the last, I think it was really starting in December of last year, where he started getting a little bit more aggressive towards my mom. He was nonverbal. He you know, all of a sudden he's like, I'm not talking,
right,
and I'm not sharing, because either sometimes you can look at him and you're like talking to him and you can see that his brain's trying to work and he wants to communicate, but he might get a couple of words out. He might get a partial sentence out.
Right.
And then sometimes he's just like, eh.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of shrugs.
Right.
And so it's hard divorcing your brain from, that's my dad.
Right.
But it's not my dad.
Yeah. In our previous conversation, it's you talked about grief,
mm-hmm.
and how you don't get to fully. It's like a stage where you've already said goodbye to your dad as you knew him, but there's no like defining line when that officially happens. It's kind of a slow, gradual kind of grief.
Yeah. Well, because it's like when we're around him, you're like, you look at him, you're like, I love this man.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, he does crazy things like steals keys and and wallets and that kind of stuff. And so you got to go find those. I mean, he's literally a 2-year-old in a full man's body. And, you know, there was one time we were there and we're helping them move, and I think he thinks he's trying to be helpful, but he's not, right?
Right.
Not at all. We're moving boxes and he's shutting the door every time, and not helpful. Or we're trying to make lunch, and I had pulled out frozen peaches and sat them out on the counter to thaw, right?
He puts them back in the freezer for you?
Yeah, like 4 times. Even after I'm like, stop, we're going to eat these. You love peaches. Let's leave it alone. And then we get him fed. We're sitting around the table eating, and he's done. He gets up and he starts like turning on the stove. Like, and I'm like, stop. What are you doing? I mean, literally a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And so it's hard because I don't want that to be my last memory.
Yeah.
So it's like what you said, where it does rob your memories.
Of course. It's got to be so difficult, Kristen, and this is an ongoing situation. And thank you for sharing. I know that it's hard, and I hope that it's somehow. I noticed you sharing on Facebook and doing these videos where you would just turn your camera on and record yourself just venting a little bit of the sadness, the frustration, the hopelessness of your situation. And I wrote you a message, and I was like, you know, that's very brave, and thank you for doing that, and thank you for sharing. And I hope it's cathartic for you, and I hope that this is cathartic for you in a way to at least be able to talk about your experience and to get it out there. Because as we said earlier, some people just suffer in silence with this. It's very personal. It's very private.
Yeah. There are a lot of ugly emotions, right? Because like my son's graduating this weekend, and I don't know if I want my dad to come because it's just so much.
I totally understand that. I totally understand.
So much, right? Because he's still so very stubborn. That is the one thing he has not given up.
You've mentioned that multiple times.
But to be embarrassed to have him be around because he's soiled, he won't change, that kind of stuff. And though everyone that I've been around has been very, very gracious, it still doesn't change the way that I feel. And who wants to be embarrassed by their parents, right? So
this is just one example of the situations that this disease can put you in that just seem almost unnatural, right? I shouldn't have to. This is not the way things should be.
Yeah.
Again, I think it is such a cruel disease, and you know. Thank goodness your dad has you and your mom and caregivers that are taking care of him. But I know the toll that it can take.
Yeah.
Obviously emotionally.
Yep.
Let's talk about what you do at Five Rings Financial and what we do at Alliance Group, Living Benefits. Alzheimer's, obviously, they're doing research. It seems that as research goes on with Alzheimer's, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great things being done at alz.org. Their goal is to end Alzheimer's. But as Alzheimer's goes on, just for example, I mean, not that long ago, they thought that this was a very genetic thing. And lately, it seems that they're like, well, maybe not actually. Alzheimer's could come from, as you were talking about, there's a lot of different factors that researchers are thinking, well, this might have something to do with it. This might have something to do with it. What are some of the risk factors that could lead to Alzheimer's as researchers are thinking today? Yeah,
TBIs, lack of sleep.
But brain injuries, things like that. People who played football or contact sports or things like that, or were in car accidents.
Yeah, could be a big space. You think about the lack of sleep or the sleep deprivation that happens in the military.
Right.
That was huge. I know for my dad, they just really were like, oh, you were in Vietnam, Agent Orange, and, military sleep deprivation, all of that kind of stuff was something that he for sure experienced. And then, being a farmer all his life, then there's that and all that comes with that. But it's almost like the further we get with this research, the murkier it gets. Yes.
So we don't have a way of predicting who might have Alzheimer's, who might be afflicted with dementia. And again, bringing it back to what we do at Alliance Group, what you do at Five Rings Financial with regard to living benefits, it's just one more of those things that we don't know what's going to happen to us in life. And we could be dealt any hand at any time. And those hands come with negative emotional stuff that happens, obviously, but they also come with financial burdens. And in the case of your dad, he did not have a living benefits life insurance. Thank goodness he has life insurance in place that was put way back in the day. But you've been in this industry for
a little over 10 years.
Yep. By that point, you said your dad was uninsurable. He'd already had some heart stuff going on.
Yep.
So he wasn't able to get living benefits.
Yep.
How might living benefits, having one of these policies in place today, how might that have helped the situation that you and your mom and your family have with your dad?
Well, I think whenever you're faced with any kind of situation, whether it's the Alzheimer's, dementia space, or cancer, or heart attack, or any of those
things that can happen.
Anything that can happen, and any of those are not necessarily genetic based. I mean, we just automatically go to the genetic thing that you were talking about, and it doesn't have anything to do with it anymore necessarily.
Or you might be more predisposed, but just because no one's had it doesn't mean you're not getting it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So you don't need to just, I'll never get cancer because none of my grandparents I know of have had cancer. Like that's not that's not how it works.
When you're faced with something like this, what you want is options.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have that piece of where you can tap into OPM or other people's money, so to speak, tax-free, never have to pay it back. But
it gives options.
It's what you want, is you want to have options of being able to be like, the ideal thing would have been to keep the one thing my dad would want to do, he would want to stay at the farm. But because we can only rely on either Medicare or the VA benefits, finding someone to live, that would be the ideal,
they would have like a caregiver to
live in, because honestly, it's a 24/7 job.
Yep.
And
right now your mom's doing that.
My mom is doing that, and she's exhausted. And she's actually to the point where she's like, I'm sick of being mad all the time. And so I've got to save her because, that kind of stress and that anger piece causes disease in her. Yeah. And so it's like, I got to save the one good parent I have.
So a living benefits policy, and for those viewers who might not know living benefits, we talk about it all the time at Alliance Group and Five Rings Financial. So this is a life insurance policy that has certain triggers built in. Yeah. It's a modern life insurance policy. A living benefits policy has triggers built in that if certain diseases or diagnoses, or even in some cases critical major injuries happen, that can act as a trigger for you to accelerate your life insurance policy's death benefit and get tax-free money in your hand. So potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars at your disposal.
Yeah.
If life throws you any of these curveballs that we're talking about. And we have carriers that we work with that cover things like Alzheimer's, that cover things like certain types of dementia, or even in some cases, the definition for a trigger can just be severe cognitive impairment, which might include Alzheimer's or any of these other types of dementia. These living benefits triggers also cover things like cancer, heart attack, stroke, major organ transplant, blindness, paralysis, lots of stuff. So the benefit of having one of these policies in place, as we were just talking about, to have options in case a wide variety of these things happens to you, of these curveballs that life can throw our way that we have no way of predicting.
No way of predicting. The other alternative would be to become insurance poor, right? So if you're that Boy Scout or Girl Scout who's like, I'm a planner, I'm going to plan for everything, you could have a cancer policy, a long-term care policy, a
life insurance policy, right?
You know, all these things, and it might cover some of it,
right?
Miss some other things,
right?
But like I said,
it's impossible to cover all those bases with individual policies.
With individual policies, but then you have the cost associated. So if you spend your money on all of those, I'm planning, I'm going to be covered, my family's going to be protected, all of that stuff.
You might be spending thousands of dollars a month,
right,
for something that might not.
In which case, you're not going to have any retirement,
right?
So the other piece of it is that, and what I love is that the carriers that we have the opportunity to work with, they do have so many triggers. I think that's important to look at when you're researching these different life insurance policies. And life insurance can be very, very overwhelming.
Right.
And there's so many different options, and there's so many different carriers. And really finding someone who knows their stuff when it comes to this, who can break it down for you and do some of the shopping for you. Thankfully, through Alliance Group, we have amazing carriers to work with who do have the laundry list of triggers.
Yep.
Which
the most awesome living benefits that are out there on the market.
Yeah.
With our carriers that we work with.
Absolutely. And they've been doing it the longest, which I think that says something.
It's very important.
Very important. And they pay the most,
Yep.
which is also important.
Which is also very important.
So there's lots of factors that come into this. Ultimately, you want to have that policy in place when you need it the most. And the one thing that I do know is that the claims that we have paid out, nobody has ever said, oh, this is too much money.
Right. Right.
They've actually said the opposite. I wish we had gotten more.
Right. I wish we had gotten more coverage
to
have more access to more money.
Yep.
It's just something, it's in this day and age, with all of these things that can happen, it makes a lot of sense to get something like this in place that is going to, yes, of course, protect and, check that box for life insurance, right? In case something happens, you do need to make sure that your family is taken care of financially. That's why people buy life insurance. But, in this day and age, that shouldn't be all that you're looking at. You should also be looking at making sure that it has living benefits so that, yes, dying is something you have to financially prepare for.
We're all going to do it.
Right?
It's 100% mortality.
Right.
Like, nobody's getting out of this alive.
Right.
So.
Right. That's definitely going to happen. And then while you're at it, while you're checking that box for life insurance, make sure it includes these features that in case life throws you one of these curveballs for cancer, heart attack, stroke, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, things like this, that you have something that might be in place to be able to help in those situations too. And as this is Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and you do what you do with Five Rings Financial, we can do our part by not only supporting the cause, obviously, but also by letting people know living benefits is a very important thing that you can put in place to make sure that, God forbid, you ever find yourself afflicted with Alzheimer's dementia, or you find yourself being in that caregiving scenario of Alzheimer's dementia. If you make sure that the people that you love are protected with living benefits, it's not going to take away the horrors of these terrible diseases, but it is going to, as you said, provide those options that are just so valuable when you're in those situations.
And I would say this too, that it's super easy to get caught up. I mean, just like I did. Like I was in that whole denial place when my mom first started talking about it. It is super easy to be in that space of it will never happen to me, or I don't have to think about this, or I don't want to think about this until you see it. Right? And then that's usually the trigger of like, oh, hey, I watched what happened with so-and-so, or this, I'm experiencing this, or the cancer piece, the death piece, some other event happened. And that's when people are like, okay, I'm going to get it done.
Right.
Which is great. But I've also had like, hey, I'm now having health problems. I need to get, and I'm like, well, now you made my job real hard.
Right.
And so it's most affordable today.
That foresight is necessary, unfortunately. I mean, it would be great if people said, oh, I got diagnosed with cancer, let me get living benefits. It's not the way life insurance works. You are underwritten for your current health. So part of our challenge and our crusade at Five Rings Financial and Alliance Group is to encourage people that are not in the situation yet. They are healthy today, but to have the foresight to put something like this in place, because, I mean, to me, the chances are 100% that you will be glad that you did. Of course, you will be glad that you did if you suffer cancer, heart attack, something like that actually triggers these living benefits. But what I've also noticed is that people who are still healthy 10 years later are so glad that they did it 10 years ago, because their prices are low, they locked it in, and they know that they have it going forward. Yeah. Whereas if they hadn't put it in place and now they're shopping for it 10 years later, they're paying more than twice the price because they've gotten older. They might have gotten more unhealthy. The best time, if you are listening to the message of living benefits and you're thinking, I should probably do this, the best time to do it is right now, today.
Right. Yep.
Because waiting just makes it more costly, and possibly you could reach a situation where you can't qualify for it anymore. So it's off the table for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is an unfortunate place, because I find that the people who want it the most can't get it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the tricky part of living benefits. So that's why it is important that we spread awareness about living benefits, and that's kind of the role that we can play during Alzheimer's Awareness Month at Five Rings and Alliance Group is, to help spread the word. Wear your purple. Do your hashtag #ALZ, go to alz.org, educate yourself. There's tons of fantastic resources there. Share the message to help end Alzheimer's and to spread awareness about this horrible disease. But also make sure that you and the people that you love are protected with living benefits.
Absolutely.
Kristen, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Thank you so much for joining us. Love to you, love to your dad, and prayers and best wishes for you guys as you go through that.
Thank you.
Listen to this interview and more on the Alliance Group podcast.